I accept your nomination for Vice President of the United States of America.
Look, this can't be another woulda, coulda, shoulda election. If you vote by mail, request your ballot now and send it back right away.
So I'm also asking you to believe in your own ability, to embrace your own responsibility as citizens.
Good evening and welcome to Foursquare, the digital video show where politicals get together to chop up the news of the week and the convention. We have made it to the end, day 4, that is day 8, day 4 of the Democratic National Convention. My name is Eugene Daniels. Joining me virtually as always are Laura Barone Lopez, Tim Alberta, and Ryan Lizza. You guys, we have made it to the end. Just 2 more hours left of the DNC. How are you guys feeling?
Sleep.
Feeling good.
I'm feeling
Yes,
better
exactly.
after next week.
Exactly.
At least we don't have to do this again.
Never again. It's not like this happening right again in a couple more days. Before we get started, I want to bring back an oldie but goodie lightning round that I love that I like to call Tell Me Something Good. I know you guys remember the song. Everyone here is old except Laura and I.
Wow. I don't have with me, even though he's so much younger.
I am. I know. Tim goes with Ryan for some reason in my head.
I can't imagine why.
It's you guys just look so much alike. You each have 30 seconds to give people some good news, something to make them feel good about the world, political, personal, cultural. Tim, I'm going to start with you.
So I got to be honest with you. I did my daily reading routine today. I checked around 5 or 6 different news organization websites that I read daily. I couldn't find a lot in the way of good news today. I think the only thing I can really come up with for you is the NBA draft lottery is tonight. That's pretty exciting. We're going to find out which team gets the number 1 overall pick. The ping pong balls are probably rigged, but it's still pretty fun to watch.
Sports. I knew that it always comes back to sports.
I didn't see anything in the business world, politics. I mean, I'm eager to hear what you guys
sad.
I didn't see any good news today at all.
What a depressing day you have, Tim. Laura, how about you?
So the state of Michigan announced this week that they agreed to pay $600 million to Flint residents who were affected by the water crisis there that started in 2015. So that class action lawsuit that was spurred because particularly Black communities were impacted very hard by the water crisis, and now they're getting some compensation for that.
That is some good news. Thank you. Sad but good news. Ryan, how about you?
I agree with Tim. It's tough to find any good news. If anything, I feel like reading the paper today, we're not emphasizing how bad things are, and this
we're going to get to that.
Democrats aren't. Even The Optimist, which is a Washington Post column devoted to good news, is just like scraping, the bottom of the barrel these days for stories. But and I know I'll get roasted by some people for this, but Donald Trump pardoned Susan B. Anthony this week. And that is good news. If another president had done that, we would all be giving him or her quite a bit of credit. And I don't know the reasons that Trump did that. God only knows how that got to his desk. But for history's sake, that is a good thing. She deserves that pardon.
I will say, I did see some feminists and women's suffragists and historians that said that when she got that ticket, when she got in trouble, she really held that up as like a good thing. So it is still controversial. I don't know if it's because of Trump is around it, but there's still some controversy around that pardon. In just 2 hours, Joe Biden is accepting the nomination. But before we go there, we had an action-packed night last night. Kamala Harris accepted the nomination, becoming the first woman of color officially to do so for any major party's presidential ticket. Here's some sound from her speech last night.
This week marks the 100th anniversary of the passage of the 19th Amendment, and we celebrate the women who fought for that right. Yet so many of the Black women who helped secure that victory were still prohibited from voting long after its ratification. But they were undeterred. Without fanfare or recognition, they organized and testified and rallied and marched and fought, not just for their vote, but for a seat at the table. These women and the generations that followed worked to make democracy and opportunity real in the lives of all of us who followed.
And President Obama was live from Philly, talking up Biden and knocking his successor, Donald Trump, in a way that we've never seen a president do before.
I did hope, for the sake of our country, that Donald Trump might show some interest in taking the job seriously. That he might come to feel the weight of the office and discover some reverence for the democracy that had been placed in his care. But he never did. Donald Trump hasn't grown into the job because he can't. And the consequences of that failure are severe.
Ryan, I want to start with you. What did you think of President Obama's speech? I know for you, that was a huge moment of the night that stood out.
Yeah, I thought it was a good speech. Historically, I think we'll look back in history and see that as a one-of-a-kind speech, just for the simple fact that you do not see a former president sort of rip the bark off his successor in that way. I think it's also interesting in as someone who's been covering Obama for a long time and has heard him talk about the Constitution and his view of American history, since early 2004, when I first started covering him. He has a very optimistic view about American progress that starts with the flawed founding of this country and a flawed constitution, but a constitution that gave Americans the tools to continually expand the circle of equality and who was defined as a citizen in the United States. You guys have heard him speak about this many, many times. It's actually kind of a controversial view of American history these days on the left. It's not that sort of was the conventional liberal view of American history. It no longer is in some quarters. Anyway, I've heard him deliver a version of that speech so many times. He did it again last night. But there was a big asterisk last night, and that when he talks about that, he then says, and then if we rise up and do X, Y, and Z, we can, accomplish marriage equality or whatever the issue of the day is. Last night was the first time I heard him say, if you don't get it right this time, if this election is not settled in favor of Joe Biden, there may be no turning back. And I think that maybe got lost in a little bit of the coverage, just how stark that warning was.
Yeah, especially from his 2004 DNC speech, right, where he was saying there's no red America, blue America. That's gone. That guy is gone.
That country is gone. It wasn't even right in 2004, to be honest, but it made everyone feel really good. Can you imagine a politician today getting up on stage and saying there's no black America and there's no white America? A lot of people
wouldn't be a politician for long.
That denies the problems in the black community, right?
Right.
And so that, I think that whole theory, and he was criticized at the time for that speech, but it was sort of ignored, frankly. Anyway, I don't think Obama believes a lot of what he said back then. Even last night, he talked about how polarized the country is in a way that contradicts what he used to believe.
Yeah. Tim, what do you think of Obama's speech, and what are the hot takes of last night? How are you feeling about the speeches last night?
Yeah, so to jump in where Ryan was leaving off, I agree. And I actually think that if you were to study the arc of Obama's convention speeches since 2004, it actually tells a pretty neat and linear tale of American politics and the forces of polarization, political, cultural, demographic, and otherwise, that have really gripped this nation and divided us harshly. And Obama last night, I think, was as noteworthy for his sales pitch on behalf of Joe Biden as he was for his, I think, sort of admittedly dark and dampened optimism, looking forward. And there was one particular thing that I found really, really striking in Obama's speech. When he got to the portion of his remarks talking about John Lewis, the late congressman and obviously a civil rights icon who died recently, Obama seemed to use the John Lewis segment of his speech to simultaneously applaud and embrace the evolving social justice movement in this country, while also sort of tacitly rebuking a lot of young leftist millennials who love to lament their present circumstances and who would rather, in some cases, spend the day on Twitter complaining about how terrible this country is, rather than observe the progress that has been made by people who had it much worse and carry on their work. And Obama hit that theme in a pretty interesting and unique way. I'd never really heard him say it like that before. So I thought that was fascinating. And a final note, guys, what are we all going to talk about today? We're going to talk about Obama. We're going to talk about Kamala Harris. There were some other striking things from last night. It's pretty remarkable that Hillary Clinton, the party's nominee 4 years ago, gave a speech last night that was completely forgettable. I mean, she had one or two, quips in there that made the rounds on social media, but there was just really nothing memorable and lasting there from her speech. And I think that's pretty notable on its own. There was not, if Michelle Obama and Kamala Harris and Barack Obama are sort of packing that punch to forge that emotional connection with voters, I just don't think Hillary Clinton really added anything in that regard.
Yeah, a key theme that we've been talking about all week, Clinton did talk about it in her speech, Laura, is the striking shift in topics, language, tone, especially when it comes to race for me. What about you?
Yeah, last night we heard, like you said, leading Democrats from Clinton to Kamala Harris talk about racism. So let's take a look.
Vote for law enforcement purged of racial bias that keeps all our streets safe. Vote for justice for George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Ahmaud Arbery, because Black lives matter.
And let's be clear. There is no vaccine for racism. We've got to do the work. For George Floyd, for Breonna Taylor, for the lives of too many others to name, for our children, and for all of us. We've got to do the work to fulfill that promise of equal justice under law.
Laura, two questions for you. What does that change in language signal about the party leadership and about the future of the anti-racist movement overall?
Yeah, so as you said, Eugene, it is a notable change. I mean, if I could just go back to 2016 for a second, in 2016, BLM organizers really prodded Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders just to simply say the words Black Lives Matter. And they ultimately did, but it just shows you the seismic shift in the party and the language that they're using, because they went much farther last night with a full-throated, repeated acknowledgement of racism and its effects on society. And I was talking to Alencia Johnson, a former senior Warren aide during her campaign, who recalled the shift that we've seen by referencing when then President Obama talked about the death of Trayvon Martin and said that, if I had a son, he would look like Trayvon, and how, quote, world-stopping that was. And now, 4 years or more later, actually, to hear Kamala Harris, the vice presidential candidate, say the names of other Black people who have been killed by police, Johnson called that earth-shattering. Now, there are still some BLM activists who were not particularly satisfied with what they heard, and they say that they're still waiting for more substance. So we expect, as you said, as the anti-racist movement moves forward, as the BLM movement moves forward, that those activists are going to continue to push Biden and the Democrats at large.
Yeah, they have a lot of conversations to have within that party on that issue. Now, time for my favorite part of the show, counter-programming. You each have 30 seconds. I have to time them on this one because they always go over, especially a certain man named that rhymes with lizard. You guys have to tell people some news that we won't get a chance to cover in tonight's show. Politics or otherwise, it can be depressing. I'll start with Tim.
So Steve Bannon got got cuffed today, indicted, and the Southern District of New York is alleging that he was essentially running a scheme, running game on a bunch of conservative voters, conservative donors, asking for their money to help privately fund the construction of a border wall, and then using that money to buy yachts and other cool stuff for himself and his buddies. And if that's proven true, if even some of these allegations are proven true, then Steve Bannon's going to the big house, and he'll be in good company as far as Trump's inner circle in that regard.
Well, Steve Bannon, obviously senior advisor to President Trump, who worked in the White House and helped him get to the White House. Laura, what about you?
So there was a new front in the battle between progressives and establishment Democrats today when Nancy Pelosi endorsed Joe Kennedy in his race to take out Ed Markey, the senator in Massachusetts. And so that's clearly angered a lot of progressives who are actually backing Markey, the incumbent, because they feel that he's strong on the Green New Deal and other progressive issues. And so that they responded in kind by just issuing scathing responses, including Representative Ocasio-Cortez, who said that it wasn't fair that DCCC, the Democratic campaign arm, decides to, whine about primaries, but then Pelosi gets involved in this one. And Justice Democrats, this progressive campaign arm, outside campaign arm, called Pelosi's move hypocritical.
Laura,
drama there too.
Eugene, can I just interrupt very quickly? Laura, why is Pelosi doing that? Like, the Democrats are going to hold the House, and she's got to win the speakership again next January. What is the play here? She just pissed off a lot of her members.
Well, she pissed off some of her progressive ones, but she potentially actually made the other members happy, because a lot of them are allies with Kennedy. They consider him a close friend, and she also feels as though he's been a good foot soldier when she needs him on votes. So I think that she made a calculated move potentially to shore up some other flanks of her caucus, as opposed to the progressives that she might enrage.
And might not even have to begin with. Ryan, how about you?
My clock says that was 8 minutes and 33 seconds. Not that anyone's keeping time.
So interesting that Tim wanted some more information. So
that's true. That's never happened before for the
You had gone over before that. That's all right.
I'm glad it's all right with Liz.
That's not, we're always seeking the acceptance and approval of Ryan Lissa on this show.
So today, a federal judge rejected President Trump's latest effort to stop Cy Vance, the Manhattan district attorney, from getting his tax returns. So this issue of Trump's tax returns, which has bounced around from Congress to various jurisdictions, another federal judge has weighed in and said the Trump argument was pretty much pathetic. And it will probably go back up to the Supreme Court at some point, although most people think that will be after the election. So the last chance to see Trump's tax returns before the election seems to have sailed. But if Trump loses, that case is not going to go away, as are, I think, a lot of these other cases. And I think if Trump loses, he's going to find himself in legal trouble on a number of fronts, not just that one in Manhattan.
Is pathetic the legal term, the official legal term that they use? The
ruling really was. It really was. It was basically, the judge said the argument was done in bad faith. I mean, there's something for a lawyer, for the judge just to be like, this is, you're not even trying here. This is a bad faith argument. That's a slap in the face.
Yeah. I wanted to be a lawyer and a judge when I was a kid, and I can only imagine how much trouble I would get into for all my rulings, because I wouldn't.
You're kind of a judge on this, though. Let's be honest.
That's true. That's true. Judge, jury, and executioner.
I always feel judged.
You should, because I am a judge.
You could be the heir apparent to Judge Judy. You could be Judge Eugene.
You guys, Politico. I hope our editors are paying attention, and so they can give me that show. Oh, you would not want to see it, I think, is where we're at. Tonight is the final night of the Democratic National Convention. After more than 30 years of running for president, his first time in 1988. I wasn't born. Laura wasn't born. The other two were here. Joe Biden will accept the nomination. You were in high school? Good Lord.
88, yeah, it was my first year in high school.
Joe Biden's going to accept that nomination of the Democratic Party for the first time. He is taking the nomination of a party that doesn't at all look how it did when he originally ran in 1988 or when he ran again against Obama in 2008. So far this week, there's been kind of a hodgepodge of doom, gloom, some hopefulness, a little bit of pragmatism. Ryan, for the final night, for tonight, what are you watching out for?
You know, I started to talk, I was talking to some Democrats today and trying to get a sense of how do you think this convention has gone so far? And one view is that, or one question I think some Democrats have is, have they got the balance between Biden's character, what he would do as president, and, you know, why Trump needs to go right? Like, those are the three big things, right? The policy, the character, and why, you know, Trump is so terrible. And I think the question out there is, did they do enough on the policy? If you are sitting there in this crippled economy with no job, are you watching a convention that is speaking to you about how Joe Biden will make your life better? And as important as that speech was last night about democracy, and as important as some of the other speeches were about Trump's, the word the Democrats would use is threat to the country, does that speak to the kind of very, very primary concerns that people have right now during the economic crisis and the pandemic? And so I'll be looking tonight to see what the balance is between those three things.
Laura, we've had dozens of different speakers over this week, many of them kind of rising stars in the future of the Democratic Party. Is there anyone on that list tonight that you're really waiting to see how they perform at all?
Yeah, I'm going to be looking at Alex Padilla. He's the California Secretary of State, and he is potentially on the short list to replace Kamala Harris should Biden and Harris win in November. And he, I'm told, has a good relationship with Governor Gavin Newsom. So what'll happen first is that the governor would appoint someone to replace Harris to most likely serve out the rest of her term until 2022. And then at that point, someone would run. And so Padilla could maybe potentially be the one appointed or deciding to run in 2022. And he has a lot of relationship with Congressional Hispanic Caucus members as well. So he's someone that many are keeping an eye on to potentially replace her. And then, of course, I'm looking at Biden. And so does he take a different tone tonight? Is he less defiant and more somber like Obama? How does he use his personal story to connect with voters?
Tim, this has been the strangest convention in modern history with the virtual aspect. But Democrats seem so far to have gotten the do no harm that they set out to do. That seems to be what everyone's saying in the chattering class. What does Biden, who isn't a stranger to missteps in speeches and otherwise, need to do to bring it home for Democrats tonight?
So I'm glad you asked, Eugene, and I just could not disagree more with Ryan here on this count, because look, the entire mantra of the Biden campaign happens to align with the mandate for this convention, which is do no harm. Don't screw this up. You're ahead. Trump is flailing. You've got Republicans on the ropes. Do not do anything to throw them a lifeline here. And so the question of, does Joe Biden want to go heavy into policy tonight? I actually think that's the exact wrong thing to do for 4 reasons. Referendum. Is that 4? Yeah, 4 things, 4 syllables, 4 words, whatever. Referendum. Keep this a referendum on the Republican Party. What Joe Biden should be doing tonight is drawing deep on that old feel-good yarn that he loves to spin about how Congress used to work together, how politicians of both parties used to get along, how the country and its institutions benefited from it. That's the kind of thing that Biden can really speak to forcefully and organically, and it happens to be something that a lot of voters like to hear. Even voters who are hardened partisans, they bemoan how the government doesn't work anymore and how nobody can get anything done because everybody's so mad at each other. Biden has an opportunity tonight to present himself as a healer and as a unifier, and he doesn't need policy prescriptions to do that.
Yeah. Final thoughts quickly from each of you on what we've learned about the party and what we can expect for the rest of the campaign season. I'm going to start with Laura.
So we got a first sign of a potentially contracting race in a poll out of Pennsylvania today that showed that Biden was narrowly leading Trump. And so the question is, how do Democrats carry forward what they've been arguing in this convention and, reach that diverse coalition that they say they have? So are they going to put in the work that is going to be needed to make sure that what happened in 2016 doesn't happen again if they want to beat Trump? And that's working to turn out those demographics, like some Black voters who stayed home from voting for Obama to then not voting for Clinton, and Latino voters as well, who right now, especially young ones, are a bit more ambivalent about Biden.
Yeah. Tim, what about you?
I don't know that we've learned anything original about the party. Look, I mean, part of, we talked about this at the outset, guys. I mean, part of the downside of a virtual convention is that you don't have the opportunity to see these, bright young rising stars who kind of come out of nowhere and grab you by the lapels through the TV screen and make you pay attention and think, wow, this person's got a future. So, and I don't think there's been any sort of bold policy rollout, again, to my point a minute ago. That feels intentional. I mean, I do think that by and large, they've tried to keep the focus on Trump. And to Laura's point a minute ago, I think they've tried in pretty smart ways to focus their attention on these two groups simultaneously: minorities who did not turn out, specifically Black voters in the industrial Midwest who did not turn out 4 years ago, and then these suburban college-educated swing voters, mostly white women in that group. And Obama has been really effective in talking to both of those groups, really over the last couple of years. And I think Michelle Obama was really the ace in the hole. But I don't think we've necessarily learned anything new. Democrats aren't trying to reinvent the wheel here. They're trying to impress upon voters that there is a greater sense of urgency than ever before to make sure that they vote in November.
Just in a few days, next week, we will be covering the Republican National Convention. Wow. President Trump will be renominated for the Republican Party. We still don't know a lot about what the convention is going to look like. The GOP decided a lot later than Democrats did, to pare down the convention, which will have parts in North Carolina, parts in Florida. The president will give a speech from the White House, he said on Monday. The First Lady seems like she's going to be giving her speech from the Rose Garden, newly renovated Rose Garden. What are you guys looking for next week, quickly, before we head to the DNC? Tim, start with you.
Look, I think all things considered, this week has gone pretty well for the Democrats in terms of the presentation. I mean, there have not been any crazy, embarrassing technological glitches. They have not had any huge screw-ups. So I actually do think that puts a little bit of pressure. I mean, it's almost like if you're playing golf, right? Like, most people want to hit second, but if the first person hits a really good tee shot, then all the pressure is on you. And I do think in that respect, because of the production quality and the relative steadiness with which this whole thing has gone off for the Democrats this week, I think it actually does put a little bit of pressure on Republicans to make sure that it goes smoothly on their end.
Yeah, Laura, what about you, quickly?
So I'm going to be looking at some of the testimonials. Republicans are Politico reported, actually our colleagues, Gabby Orr and Alex Thompson, reported that Republicans are looking at what Democrats did and taking notes about how they used personal testimonials and everyday people to talk about the candidate. And so the convention, we do know, is going to feature a couple from St. Louis who pulled their guns out on BLM protesters. And so that is at least one of the testimonials that we're going to be hearing at the Republican National Convention. So a stark contrast to Democrats.
Yeah, it seems like there's going to be some cancel culture talk based on some of the speakers that we've seen so far. Ryan, I'll let you have the last word on this.
Actually, Rudy Giuliani floated that in an interview with me, and we reported it in Politico, and sure enough, now it's happening. Two things, one short term and one long term. In the short term is just how do Trump and the Republicans take advantage of this 2 hours of primetime TV they're going to get for 4 nights? Most of the cable networks showed everything. They rarely went to break, even when it was kind of just, complete propaganda. How far does Trump push that? Will CNN or MSNBC pull back and say, wait a second, we're not airing this. This is, stuff that's just not true, the way they have with White House briefings. And then long term, Do we get any signals about the Republican Party if Trump loses in the fall? Do we get any sense of this great question about does he continue to define the party going forward, or are there, shoots in the soil that suggest a different direction?
Thank you guys so much, the three of you. This has been really fun as always. And for the viewers, thank you for watching our special convention coverage this week. It's been a wild ride, so we appreciate you spending that time with us. Before we go, I just want to say a huge thank you to the folks that you don't get to see that made this, that held my hands and helped us put all this together. Michael Cadenhead, Brooke Mentors, Lena Miller, Catherine Wilson, and Courtney Rohrbach. It would be lost completely without those people to help us get this on the air. Viewers, you stick right here. 2 more hours of the DNC, and you can watch it at Politico.com right after I shut up and let you do that. You get the best analysis, reporting. You get to watch it. What more could you want? We'll be live right here at 8:30 on Tuesday for the Republican National Convention. See you then.